thing?
You can.
Okay.
It would be preferred if you did, yeah.
All right. So I wanted to just start out with basics because that's how my teacher taught me. The basics really are just learning about polygons and what they are, because all 3D models are made up of polygons. All right. So you got your 3 shapes here, which will be your building blocks for any 3D models. There is the triangle, the quad, and the n-gon. An n-gon is anything that's bigger than 4 sides. So it could be a pentagon, it could be a hexagon, octagon. Any number of vertices bigger than 4 will be an n-gon. And a quad is anything that's 4 vertices, 4 sides. It could be a triangle. It could be, let me just get used to this. All right. It could be a triangle. It could be a rectangle. It could be any shape as long as it has 4 sides. And what?
Triangle doesn't have 4 sides.
Did I say triangle?
Yeah.
Okay, I meant quad, guys. It's a long day. All right, a quad is that thing in the middle. As long as it has 4 sides, it's a quad. A triangle has 3 sides. Anything smaller than that would just be an edge, and I'll demonstrate to you here. Let's dissolve that. There you go. That's an edge. And these are vertices that I'm clicking on. So if I delete that, then I'll just have one vertex. So I wanted to start off with this because when you're 3D modeling, you do not want to 3D model in anything but a quad. Quads are flexible, and they can bend. They can be manipulated using their edge. Let me select on that, like that. But an n-gon, it doesn't bend very well. So you can see here the shading is all, I don't want to curse, so the shading is all screwed up here, and you can't bend it. It's really hard to model with an n-gon. It's even harder to animate with an n-gon. So for anything that moves, don't use an n-gon. If you're making like a wall or a table, just something that just stays still, doesn't animate, then an n-gon is fine. But if you're planning to move your character or your model, don't use anything but quads. Triangles are fine. Game engines, they end up triangulating everything when you import it into like Unity or Unreal. So it's fine, but it's still hard to, it's not hard to animate with a triangle, but if your character has, or like if you're 3D modeling and your model has triangles, it's very limited, so you can't really manipulate it as predictably. No, they're predictable, but they're very limited, so they just don't use triangles. So yeah, that pretty much wraps up the basics for the polygons that you're going to be using. So just more of the story is just use quads. So I want to teach you guys, for anyone who is following along with Blender, how to navigate. Is anybody like totally brand new to Blender? All right. Feel free to, do you have it on your computer right now? You can. I'm actually gonna teach from the very basics here. I got a whole thing planned here. I want to walk you guys through how to model something basic using the basic tools, extruding, all the transformations like scaling, rotating, and eventually, hopefully by the end of today, we will have something for your game, a working character that's fully rigged. I hope within the hour that we have. And teach you guys how to just do some basic animations. Nothing really super like fancy, just a basic, low poly character for your game if you're gonna be using 3D art. So let's start out with viewport. Blender is notorious for lots of shortcuts It's not very user-friendly, but it has pretty much everything that you can expect from a 3D modeling program. You can use Maya. Maya is a lot more user-friendly, but I find Blender pretty fast, and there's a lot of shortcuts and quality of life things like precision transformations, and just so the shortcuts will save you a lot of time. And I think Blender is not too bad for free software. I think it's pretty on par with like 3D Studio Max. Maya and Modo still has a lot more features than it, but it's catching up pretty quickly. In the past couple of years, it's pretty well supported by, well, especially by Unity, which is what most of you guys are using. Unreal is still catching up on supporting Blender, but I think they're planning to. There are, okay, so if I'm gonna start out from the very beginning, like Book of Genesis, I am going to start out with viewports because 3D modeling, the one thing that they all have in common is the viewports. I want to get back to
You can look at your screen, like you don't have to look at this.
Oh yeah, I want you guys to see what I'm seeing. All right. I wish I had my numpad here because the shortcuts are really great, but I will just have to make do with this. So you got your orthographic view, which is just a flat view of what you're looking at, and you got your perspective view. If you press 5 on your numpad, you can toggle them back and toggle between perspective and orthographic view. And then you got your left and right and front. So if you go to left, right, and front, they should be switching automatically to orthographic, but if it doesn't, just press 5 on your numpad, and we'll start from there. So let's create a cube. When you open up Blender, they usually start you out with a cube like this. So you got your cube here. As a rule of thumb, the first thing I do is, when I open up a new project file, is change the working units. And you got your, whatever this thing is called here, I don't know the name of it, but your thing on the right, this menu here, you'll see there's a globe icon here, and there's like a camera icon here. You want to click on the third one, this little thing here. That's to edit your scene, and you can change your working units to metric under length, and then just keep the scale at 1. I'm not sure about Unity, but Unreal, it's really screwy with the when you import something into Unreal, and it could be super small. So you just want to start with metric because that's how Unreal does it. So the basic tool for 3D modeling is extruding. So you got your cube here, and if you press tab, you'll go into edit mode. And when you're in edit mode, if you can't hit tab, then just go to the bottom left here. So you got your object mode, edit mode, sculpt mode, vertex, weight, and texture paint. You want to go to edit mode. So when you select something, oh, by the way, so selection in Blender is it's super backwards compared to other like Maya. You got your right mouse button to select something, and left mouse button is not selection, it's to change your pivot point for some reason. So that's how Blender does it. So you want to select something, you right mouse click on your cube. If you want to deselect it, I usually just press A. A selects everything in your scene, or if you press it again, it'll deselect everything. So click on your cube and press tab, or go to the bottom right here, bottom left here, and go to edit mode. And at the bottom, you'll see, in the middle panel here where my mouse is, you'll see vertex selection, edge selection, and face selection. Vertex will highlight all the edges, anything that you click on, and you can move the arrows to move them around. And same thing with edge. If you click on an edge, you can move that around, like that. And if you click on face, you can click on any face here. Oh, by the way, moving the camera. Middle mouse button will be used to move the camera around. And if you hold shift and use the middle mouse button, you can pan around. So use holding shift and using the middle mouse button to drag in the viewport will be, dollying, no, not dollying, just panning the camera around. And you can dolly using the scroll wheel, or you can hold control and use the, drag out the middle mouse button to zoom in and out. And anything that you select, if you press, try pressing the dot button on your numpad, it'll frame the selection. I don't have the numpad here, so I can't do that. All right, so once you're in edit mode and you got face selection on, go ahead and select the top face and press E. That'll extrude out another polygon from that face. And this is what you'll be using most of the time to build out your models. Once you have that extruded out, you can press S to scale. You can scale in, you can scale on an axis, like if you press the Z axis, you can scale it up and down, X, sideways, Y, scale on the Y axis. So let's scale it down to this size here. I don't know why it's acting like that. Oh, all right. Okay. All right. So that's extruding, scaling, inset. Okay. So basically, you'll be using extruding most of the time. Extruding is what you'll be using to build appendages, to build legs, to build tables, table legs, anything that you need to do to basically build out your model. So you can select on the side here, and you press extrude. It'll go this way, and it'll go in the direction based on the normal. The normal is the direction that the face is pointing at. So if you're extruding this face here, it's just going to keep going in that direction. But if you press E and you press, so you see the Z axis is highlighted. If you press Z again, it'll just let you freely move it anywhere you want. But if you press the right, whenever you extrude, when you press the right mouse button, it'll just stay there. But if you press the S button, you can scale that face inwards. And then if you press the E button again, extrude again, you can actually go inside like that, and you can create a hole. All right. If anybody has that shape, that basic shape, we can go with this. We can probably create something like I don't know, like a gun or something. So once you're familiar with extruding, we can go on to adding face loops, edge loops. You can cut. You know what? Sorry, guys. Let's actually make something. So go ahead, let's just start out a new scene. All right, let's start with a cube. Let's make a sword. So once you have your cube here, go ahead and press Control R. Oh wait, actually go into edit mode. So press tab and go into edit mode, and press Control R, and you'll see this purple line just like flashing on your model. Go ahead and press the left mouse button. That'll create an edge right through the middle. Oh, if you press the right mouse button, it'll just leave it in the middle. But you can actually control it. You can actually move it around. But yeah, just press the right mouse button after you press Control R. It'll just leave the edge split through the middle. And what I want you guys to do is just go to Face Select and select all the faces and go ahead and delete it. Delete by, you can either press just the delete button and it'll bring up the delete menu. What I like to do is press X because it's closer to the rest of the shortcuts. And just press X, it'll bring up the delete menu, and you can just choose faces under the delete menu to delete the faces. So that'll just leave you with that. And we'll use that as the hilt, the handle for the sword. So go ahead and select these two faces. Press S to scale, and press Y to scale on the Y-axis. If it's not Y for you, then it's probably X, depending on which face you selected. Go ahead and select the bottom one here and move it up. And then while you have the bottom face selected, press E to extrude it. Extrude it down a little bit, and we'll just scale it in. Press S. Move it up a little bit. Press E again to extrude, and then scale it in a little bit more. Move it up a little bit. Oh, select these two faces on the side that was cut, and go ahead and press X to delete those faces. Let's go back into object mode. And while that object is selected, go to this wrench here on the right. Click on Add Modifier. And what you want to do is select the mirror modifier. And that'll just mirror over. Turn on clipping so that any vertices in the middle, right through the middle there, it's just gonna merge together instead of having them split apart like this. Well, if you go to object mode. So without clipping, they're just gonna be on top of each other. But with clipping on, you can actually move them closer, and they're just gonna merge like that. So once you have mirror modifier on, turn on clipping, go back into edit mode, and in order to select the whole object, what you do is hover over that object and press L, and I'll just select any adjacent faces, vertices, or lines. It'll just select the whole thing, and you can just move the other side of the sword handle like inward so that it merges with its mirror, like that. Now that you got that piece, go ahead and do cut in an edge loop by pressing Control R, and just move it up like this. And then go back into Face Select. And then extrude this one, but don't move it out. Just press the right mouse button to leave it there. Scale it in, press S. Like that. And then what we do is we'll extrude out the, is it the hilt or just the other part of the T part of the handle. So press E again to extrude it out like this. Well, maybe not that far. Press E again, extrude, and we'll scale this part in. And let's make it a little longer. Extrude a little bit more and scale it in like that. All right, now you got this part. Select the top face here, and we'll extrude out that part. But let's let's right mouse button to leave it there and scale it in a little bit. And then we'll build out the blade. Well, you know what? Let's make it a little thinner. So press the scale button, and we want to scale on the y-axis. Press Y, and oops, and just move it in. Just make it a little bit thinner. And now we want to extrude again. Press E, move it up all the way, as long as you'd like your sword to be. All right. So while you're at the top here, keep that face selected. Press E again to extrude. But this time, let's go to edge select mode on the bottom. And select that edge and move the red arrow to create a little tip. So there's a basic sword. You can add more edge loops. Control R anywhere you want, and you know, create a little bit of an indent here, or just details. Select these edges, scale it in. Maybe add another edge loop here and here. So however you want to create a little texture to your sword handle. I can even extrude it like that. All right, that's not looking so good. Well, let's undo that. Yeah.
So when you apply like image textures to the sword, like the surface or like colors or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, would you have to apply it to every face here?
No. Let's actually get into that. I wasn't actually going to get into any textures or materials today, but we can actually color it. Just give it like a basic color. They're called color IDs. So if you create, so you can actually select whichever faces you want. Like, let's select the blade here. And then you can actually give it its own material in Blender. And then when you import it into Unreal, and I think it's the same thing with Unity, you can actually, they'll be given different color IDs. So let's call this part the blade. So you want to click on the second icon on the left, on the right next to the wrench. This little sphere here, that's the material editor. And click on that, and you should already have something called material here. That's just your default material. You can actually add another material to it by clicking on the plus sign here, and click on new. And then if you double click that, you can rename it. So I'll rename this blade. It's blade 2. Whatever. Yeah, let's just move on. So then you can change the color of the blade by double clicking. I think it's double click on this thing, or is it? That should be the preview, but there's a way to change the color. Just don't know where exactly it is. It's been a while since I've used Blender. Oh, here it is, diffuse. So there's this little white part here under diffuse. That's just the white color. If you click on that, you can change it to red or blue or whatever. And then you can change the specularity here. Just turn up the intensity for specularity to make it all shiny and everything. We are making the blade part of it. So while you have the faces selected and you've created your material, go ahead and click on the material and click on the assign button, and that'll turn blue. And then anytime you change the color, it's just going to change the color like there. So let's go with like this teal blue color here, something muted. I'm trying to create something realistic here, but let's go. So none of the look here, none of the colors that you create here will actually translate over into Unreal or Unity. When you bring it over into an Unreal and Unity, they have their own material system and their own shaders and everything. But what you're doing is pretty much you're just creating color IDs for your faces, and when you import it into Unity and Unreal, it'll give you a list of all your color IDs, and then you can just like select whichever one that you've already preset and apply a material within Unreal or Unity. So we can just keep going along with that. Just keep adding materials, naming them like sword handle, and then just select the faces here. If you want to deselect, what I usually do is press Z to go into wireframe mode, and press B to box select, and then just drag out a box. Just drag out a box. Oh, god damn it. All right, press C. Press C to circle select, and then just use your scroll mouse, your wheel to make it bigger, and then you use the middle mouse button to deselect. So what I usually use wireframe for is selecting faces that are behind some polygons. And then just press Z again to toggle back. And once you have your sword handle selected, go ahead and assign the sword handle material to it. And then you can change the color to like gold or something. Or copper. There you go. Just make it nice and shiny. If you change it to like tune, I'm not sure. Oh, you'd have to switch to rendering. So if you guys want to check on your material, the lighting is all different though. You'd have to set some light to see it, but if you want to change your, just to have a sneak peek at your material, your textures, or even just like the rendered view, you can actually select that next to where you select object mode and edit mode. But I don't think we can see it right now. For now, no. Yeah, we don't need that because none of that's actually going to translate over into your game because the game engine itself has their own shader system. So anything that Blender does, it's totally separate from what you're going to see in Unity, in Unreal. All right, so we've already gone through extruding, face selects, edge loops.
I want to do animation.
Are we good on time?
Like 20 minutes.
Animation already? Okay. I want to actually go through some selection options first, just to make you guys' life easier. Go back into edit mode and go ahead and go into edge select. If you guys want to select an edge loop is basically anything that's running through around your model. So if you want to hold Alt and press right mouse button. So this is not an edge loop because it's actually splitting into two edges here. But if you want to select, for example, this edge loop, you hold Alt and you press the right mouse button. And then you can actually select that edge loop and either scale it in or even do this. If you have this edge loop selected, you can actually bevel it, Control B to bevel. And that'll just smooth it out. Beveling works great when you want to smooth out a corner like this. And actually, speaking of smoothing, you can actually smooth out. So right now you're looking at it as a flat shading mode. But if you want to switch up your shading mode into smooth, go back into object mode. And while you have your object selected, you just click on the left here. There's a smoothing button here, and that'll just make it smooth shaded. But the thing about this is it doesn't have many polygons on it, so the smoothing option won't look great because you don't have as many faces for your model. If you want to create more faces, you want to do something called subdivide. So you want to go back to the wrench on the right here, under modifiers. Go ahead and add a modifier and select subdivision surface. And then what that will do is it'll just create a whole bunch of faces into your model. Right now you're just looking at a preview, but if you go ahead and apply it, oh, you can't apply in edit mode. So you have to go back into object mode, tab out, and go ahead and apply subdivision. And you can see here, it added a whole bunch of faces to this. So when you're 3D modeling, you're basically just making something in a low poly, making something low poly, and then just adding a subdivision modifier to it. In Maya, it's the same thing, but they have their own smooth preview that you don't have to actually add a modifier to it. You can just press like a button. But this is how Pixar does it. This is how like pretty much every software does it. You just model in low poly and then just add either subdivision or some smoothing option that'll just make it look pretty and the shading look nice. If you go ahead and undo the applying the subdivision. And under subdivision, you can actually add more polys by, I think it's this one. Yeah. Go ahead and press the arrow button to switch it up to 2 to 3, and you can see here, the more polys you add to it, the smoother this looks. And when you're in edit mode, it shows the framework as the low poly. But if you want to see how it looks while you're in smooth preview, click on this triangle icon here, and that'll just show you the framework. Wait. No, actually, that'll just wrap the edges around the smooth preview. But if you want to turn that off, that's fine too. So while you're editing, it's actually going to show you a preview of how it's going to look after you apply the subdivision. Let's go ahead and cancel that though. If you want to remove a modifier, you can just press the X. You can actually move it up and down as well, if I remember how. Oh, by pressing the arrow buttons here. But basically, you want to keep the mirror modifier on top because usually that screws up everything if you move the mirror modifier. So just go ahead and cancel the subdivision. Just click on that X. And let me walk you guys through a few more moving and transforming options. Let's go ahead and just select the top of the sword here. Just select that face. And if you press G, you can actually move it freely. If you select this edge here, go ahead and alt right mouse button and select this edge loop. If you press G, you can move it freely, but if you press G, you can actually slide the edge down along the model. And while you're in transform, if you're scaling something or rotating something, press E to rotate. Like if you want to rotate this part here. Oops, that's not E. Oh, rotate is R. R is rotate. E is extruding. Sorry, my bad. I'm still stuck in Maya. R is rotate, and I don't know why I'm rotating this part here though. Shit, what do I talk about next? All right, let's skip that part. I'll tell you guys all that later. All right. Since we're running out of time, maybe I can just start on building the character. Before I get into that, though, I want to tell you guys just the basics, philosophy of how 3D artists make a character. We're not going to make a character like this, but I just want to show you guys the workflow of a character. So as you guys can see here, this is what I was talking about. When you're modeling, you're starting out with low poly. You're starting out with low poly, and then what you guys do is you add subdivision to smooth it out. And then while you're in subdivision mode, you have a lot more polys to work with, and you can start sculpting out the little details on his jacket and everything. And then what they do is they create a texture map, and then bake that onto the low poly, and then they use this detailed high poly model to bake the details of all the little sculpted details onto the low poly, and then they have a finished look like this. So it's all an illusion. In a game like Overwatch, for example, you can see something like all the little details on the character. That it's just basically a flat plane, like his arm here, and they just project that part of the detail onto his wrist. And what you're seeing is just a combination of the texture, what they call the diffuse map, the texture, the colors, and the bump map, the details. So that's just an illusion. That's a flat surface right there. You can do either. In Blender, you can actually paint right onto the model, and then whatever you're painting on, they project it onto like a 2D plane, and then you can actually import that over into Unreal or even to Photoshop, and then continue on with painting onto that 2D image plane. Yeah. Yeah. So you're basically wrapping the texture around the object, but that's just the diffuse texture map. The diffuse is just the diffuse is really just the color details, and then the normal map is where you'll have the details sculpted into the model, the high poly model, and then you'll wrap that as a separate texture plane, and that'll be connected to the normal maps. So that'll give the illusion of depth here. Again, this is all an illusion. There's no actual bumps on the guy here. It's just projected details. You're just wrapping it around him. But we're not gonna make something like super detailed. I just wanted to.
I just noticed you're bad at this also. Yeah, we tried.
Oh wait. Can you click connected for me?
I got it. Just go ahead. Just keep running.
Go ahead and create a new scene, guys. So for character modeling, there's pretty much there's a lot of approaches, but the three that I've learned so far is box modeling, starting out with a mask, or skin modifier. Box modeling, you're pretty much just modeling in low poly again. It's great for low poly looks, but again, you can also add subdivision to it. You can add subdivision to smooth it out, but again, you're just doing what we did with the sword. You're just making a low poly and adding a subdivision here. So once you add that, and then turn on smoothing, it's just gonna smooth them out like that. So when you're box modeling, you end up with a pretty good looking model, but it's hard to actually add details to him unless you really want to just go into like adding face loops like a million times. So the second option here is to start out with like a face mask, and you're just building out well, that's not it. That's I think this is it. Okay, you're making a face. You're starting out with a mask, like this, and then you're just pulling like the edges back to form the curvature, and based on your reference, yeah. Based on your reference, you're just going to be following like the contours of the front of his face, the side of his face. Oh, that's not aligned. But yeah, you start out with that, and you end up with this.
Oh, is it from Pen and Page, isn't it?
Well, I made him before I made Pen, but I used this method to model Pen. So you end up with this, starting with that face mask, and you're just extruding edges. You can extrude edges, you can extrude vertices, and you can extrude faces. So you're just extruding it out based on your reference image, and just following the contour of your reference image. And eventually you end up with something like this. So this is why it's good to learn anatomy, so that you can just kind of learn as you can just basically, you understand like where the hips go, how round things should be, and just proportionality. So what we'll be using is this is something I just started learning. It's called skin modifier, and you're just creating an edge here, and from that edge, with the skin modifier on, it's gonna build like blobs pretty much around the edge. And this will be easier for you guys because you don't need to worry about like too much about building the character from like a building block. You're just creating an edge, and you're forking it out into appendages like arms and legs, like that. So let's start doing that. Oh, and by the way, like you can actually use that for pretty much any shape. Like this is how I used the skin modifier recently to build this guy. Oh, wait, that's the finished model. All right, I don't know why I'm getting into this. I can't. Anyway, let's start building a character. Go ahead and create a new scene, and let's delete this cube. If you guys want to add a polygon, hold Shift and press A. It'll bring up the Add menu. And let's go ahead and add a mesh plane. So highlight Mesh, and select Plane. And we'll have this here. Go into Edit mode and select all the vertices. And press X. And go to Dissolve Vertices. Wait. Okay. If you guys can't find something in Blender, a good tool is the space bar. Press the space bar and type in merge. And then click on merge. And then what we'll do is, after you click on merge, this will pop out. Go ahead and choose at the center. And that'll just leave us with one vertex right here. And it's right in line with the center of the world. And that's important for later when we use the mirror modifier if we need it. So let's extrude out a line like this. And then go back into object mode. While you have that edge selected, click on the wrench and add a skin modifier. And then after you add a skin modifier, click on subdivision surface. And then we'll just subdivide that into 2. So what we'll do is make his torso, and then at the bottom make his legs, and at the very top make his head. So we'll extrude out. It'll actually be easier to look through by pressing Z to go into wireframe mode. And while you have that top vertex selected, go ahead and extrude that. Press Z to extrude based on the Z axis. And to scale that in, it's not scaling, but it's Control A, and then you actually fatten or shrink that up. Just move it down a little bit. And we'll extrude it again to form maybe the neck. So this could be the neck here. Extrude it again. This will be the top of the head. And while you have the top of the head selected, go ahead and select these 2 vertices. And on the left side here, you can actually subdivide these 2 to add a 3rd vertex in the middle here. So subdivide is on the left side. And while you have that middle vertex selected, press Control A to fatten that up. And at the bottom of the head, let's pull that out. And while you have the bottom of the head selected, select the one for the neck. 2 hours. All right, almost done. We'll subdivide that. So we got a neck here. Go ahead and select these 2. And we'll subdivide that. And then we'll extrude that part. Oops. We'll extrude out that part to form the hand.
Adam,
What's up?
can you try to end in 10
Yeah, I told him.
Yeah, I got the cue. This is really hard to do in an hour.
You're doing great, Adam.
Thanks. All right. So let's go back into object mode and turn on a mirror modifier. So let's go ahead and add a mirror modifier. It's not working. And we'll move up the mirror modifier by clicking on the arrows. Move it up. And then you want to change it to the y-axis. So while you're editing in mirror mode, it's just gonna make a copy of the arm on the other side. Extrude that part. And at the bottom here, let's extrude out the legs. Or let's just do the hips. You can see this red circle here. That's just indicating where the root of this the skeleton is. Let's make the root of it here. So select that vertex, and in the skin modifier editor, there is a button called Mark Root. You want to click that button. That way we can just extrude out legs. So go ahead and select the bottom here, extrude out that part. Move this in a little bit. We'll extrude out the arm a little bit more. And then you can just scale this down. Control A to scale it. Extrude out another part. And this will be like the knee. So he's not very lined up, but that's okay.
Just break his legs.
Yeah. Poor guy. Alright. So this is something we can work with. He's not looking so great here, but if you go to wireframe mode again and select these vertices, and just go back to the mirror modifier, the skin modifier, go ahead and click on Mark Loose, and that'll fix at least most of it. Mark Loose. All right. If that doesn't fix it, just move it down until it fixes itself. There you go. And we'll move these out. So you want to just space out these polygons a little bit. Especially for armpits, it's really hard to animate when your armpits are really close together, so we need to like create a little gap here. Do we have time to animate? Or I'll show you guys how to rig.
Just do how long are we rigging today?
I don't know.
Like
10 minutes
Yeah,
to rig?
maybe another time.
Yeah.
It's 8:30 right now.
Maybe another time.
Okay.
Just finish it off.
Oh, so you can end there.
Yeah? Alright guys, let's end here.
I don't know.
We finished with the character. We can save this guy if you want to save him. Or we can just make another guy the next time.
This is incredible with those hips, dude.
Any questions?
I don't know.
I think we should have just modeled something basic today and then save character for next time.
I think that's
Yeah.
good. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's not all, but that's yeah. We can be done. Yeah.
It's cool.
Yeah. So this is something you can animate next time if you want to save him, and we can actually start rigging him. This is really all you need to start rigging and animating, but that's going to take a while, so we can just save it for next time. Cool.
Woo!